Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I want to give credit right away to Dwayne from Dad Surviving Divorce, DSD, because it's a saying that he's mentioned pretty much in every one of his videos, at least ones where it comes up to the issue of like divorce or child custody, basically the court system. It's not a sprint. It's not going to be something that you finish really quickly. It's going to take a long time. And if you don't plan for that marathon, if you just sprint in the beginning and tire yourself out and just quit, which most people do, then it's not going to be a great outcome for your kids. At least not if it's a high conflict child custody case. In fact, it's kind of a given that it is, because if it's not a high conflict child custody case, then it is going to end really quickly because both sides are going to want it to end. Both sides are going to make decisions in their lives that move that case towards a conclusion quickly. It's going to close. It's going to be over. That's it. And those people are really lucky. For the rest of us that are here watching this channel, keep on watching. So with a high conflict X, you have to embrace the fact that it's going to take a long time. And you have to plan for your next hearing, even while you're fighting at your current hearing, or whatever sometimes you don't get a hearing. Whatever issue that's in front of the court now, you have to deal with that issue with a mindset, with a thought towards the future. Plan now and set yourself up with as many tools as you can for what you're going to need when this issue comes up again, because in high conflict cases it often does. The biggest reason, there's two big reasons people lose. One of them is, at least when it comes to this issue, one of them is that people think to themselves, I can't take this, it has to be over now, and if it's not, I just give up. I'm done, I quit. And the funny thing about that is that those people end up when they end up back in court the second time, they can remember back to what they thought the first time. And I mean, at least with me, it's like you want to reach back in time and slap yourself. It's like, that's a stupid thought. I needed you to do certain things so that now at this hearing I could use those. And it's like you live in a Groundhog Day almost with that mentality, that desperation for it to be over so quickly. Every time you're back in court, you're kicking yourself because last time, or at least if you're paying attention, because some people aren't even paying attention to the mistakes they're making. If you're paying attention to your mistakes, you're kicking yourself because the last time you were pissed off that you couldn't resolve everything right then and there, and you didn't set yourself up in ways that you needed now so that you could win. And the time before that, it was the same thing. And the time before that, it was the same thing. So it's like this constant Groundhog Day of if it's not going to end now, I just quit. I'm done with it. And you just get dragged through the system for years and years, or you just give up, and it's much worse for you if you do give up. It's much worse. So anyway, the second issue I was going to mention was that the ex can detect it. I mentioned this in the video, hide emotions from abuser. They can detect that you want the case to end quickly. They can tell. And as I've mentioned in that video a bunch of times, they're sadistic in their desire to not let you have what you want, in their desire to see you suffer. So they can smell it, and they will continue to do what they do, which is to not let the case end. By the way, this could in ways apply to a normal civil case or a criminal case, because those cases do take a long time. Some of them take years, but the thing is, with those cases, you know there's an end that's coming. You can't really drag those cases on. I know people say, well, an appeal counts as dragging that on. In my opinion, not really. It's part of the process. To me, what drags on child custody case is post-judgment motions, because there really is no end in sight when it comes to those. There really is. I mean, you could, in theory, infinitely file those until you drop dead. It's crazy. So anyway, that's why, to me, I'm doing this video with an eye towards child custody, because that's basically the bulk of the case in high conflict cases, is post-judgment proceedings over and over and over again. So I thought about bringing up some examples as to how I strategically planned for the future while I was fighting something now. And well, the first thing I want to do is direct people to my video, Surviving Mistakes, because in that video I explain how I was able to use the mistakes, or the losses, the mistakes that I made, the things that I failed at, in ways that helped me win later on. So that's one example of how, even while I was fighting losing issues, I was still able to prepare myself in the future, give myself the tools that I needed to win when it counted. So please watch that one if you want to see some examples of, how to really embrace the whole philosophy of it's a marathon, not a sprint, in the sense of losing, in the sense of winning. It's it mainly comes down to two things. One of them is, even though you're winning on an issue now, don't get your hopes up thinking that it's not going to come up again, and try to get as much in that order, in that victory. Try to get as much in that order that you can use to bind your opponent in the future. So, for example, when I got an award of primary physical custody, I won this one. I didn't want the order to just say, Mr. Falcone, in the best interest of the child, Mr. Falcone gets primary physical custody. There are very specific things that I really wanted my attorney to get into that order, because I was already expecting there to be issues and I needed to use that language in that order in the future. So one of them is, I wanted specific language stating that the court made a finding of dental neglect, because I knew that sentence, I could use that sentence in the order in the future to block my ex or her attorney from forcing me to go back to mediation, because in the Washoe County District Court rules, under mediation, you can get out of mediation if you can show that there was a finding of neglect. So I wanted that in the order. I was thinking ahead. I was like, I'm glad that I've won, but I need certain things in here because this is not over, and I'm going to need to use these things in the future. I also knew that I was going to have issues with doctor's appointments, and I needed the language in the order to cover both that the source of conflict was my ex, and that the animosity in the case was extraordinarily high, because I was already visualizing in the future, I'm going to end up filing a motion on this, and I want to be able to cite back to this motion that this was a problem that the court recognized. And that was a big thing for me. I did end up doing that. I did almost everything that I put in that order, I ended up using in the future when I went back to court over and over and over again. So when you have your victory, don't get so drunk on victory that you just rush through it and you don't even care what details are in that order. You're going to need very specific things in there. Of course, they have to be something that was proven at the hearing. It can't just be something that's concocted out of thin air. But that's really one of the things I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I was going to do a separate video on this, but I decided it's not really a big enough issue, is learning from your victories. Sometimes when you win, it wasn't totally correct, and it's kind of an advanced technique to learn from your victories, because most people think, well, I won, so what's there to learn? Everything that I did was right. Well, not always, not really. In the court system, that's not true. I can only give you one example right now off the top of my head, but there were a few times where I really had to take this to heart. I'm just going to give you this one example. So there was one time when my judge ordered me to disclose who was ghostwriting my papers, because my judge was convinced that I was having a lawyer write my papers because they just were too, I guess they were too good or whatever. And I filed an affidavit saying there was no lawyer helping me. It really was just me. My lawyer, or the judge filed an order to show cause, to hold me in contempt of court, because he apparently didn't get that affidavit. His clerk didn't read it or whatever. It was on file. It was there in the system. And I filed, in response to his order to show cause, I filed an objection invoking peremptory challenge of judge, which was specific to a Nevada rule that says if your judge is trying to hold you in contempt, you can object to that judge from presiding over the contempt hearing, and thus get a different judge to preside over it. That's what I wanted to happen. Well, my judge read that objection and he vacated his order. So he didn't even hold a hearing. There was no separate hearing. There was no other judge appointed. And this is an example of something that I won on. I filed something and it worked. I got what I wanted. Well, a year later, I started thinking about it, and I went and checked the statutes, and actually there's an exception in there that says that that objection for a new judge can't be used in a family case. So there were times later on when I almost used that, but I learned from my victory. Even though I won, I realized I used the wrong mechanism. The judge didn't tell me. He just granted my request. But that's an example of sometimes when you win, be very careful thinking that you were 100% right. So when it comes to telling other people, when it comes to posting something on the internet, when it comes to doing it again, like if you're going to repeat what you did in the past, just be careful. you might still need to just double check some things. You're learning, you're not an attorney, you're going through a complicated process. Don't be afraid to check back on yourself, even though you won, to make sure that everything that you did was legit. Because, like I said, in my case, I learned something that was important because I help a lot of people all the time, and I don't want to tell people, hey, I filed this in my case and it worked, file it in yours, and then when it gets denied and then stricken or they get sanctioned and they get mad at me, it's like, why'd you say that? It didn't work, it was wrong. It's part of the process of learning. Everyone always hears the saying, you learn from your mistakes, but in court, sometimes you got to learn from your victories. Sometimes you win and something wasn't exactly right. So anyway, with that, I think I'm going to end this video. I really hope that, as frustrating as it might be for people to accept the fact that you're not going to get through this very quickly, the sooner you accept the fact, the sooner you'll actually get through it. Even though it won't be quick, it won't be as long as it will for the person who just refuses to plan ahead, who refuses to you think to the future. That person who's just living that Groundhog Day until their child turns 18, getting raked over the coals emotionally, financially. Anyway, I mean, it's a living hell either way, but at least if you're looking to the future, at least you have a chance of either getting out of it eventually or minimizing the damage to you and your child, because you're paying attention and you're going to start winning more. If you're thinking ahead, you're going to make decisions that help you in the future, and that's going to invariably lead to more victories. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and I hope it made some sense to people, because I was worried that it would be a little bit too, I don't know, abstract, or I try to get examples when I can, but I don't always have them available, especially not off the top of my head. So maybe if people here have something that they can post in the comments below that can help other people see how planning ahead for them was a successful, or help them succeed, that would be great. Go ahead and post that. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.